Well, few better understand the intricacies and the importance of the Farm Bill than 3rd District Congressman Frank Lucas. Lucas serves as the chairman of the House Agricultural Committee and the principal author of the legislation designed to guide U.S. food policy. Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for being here. Well, I've heard it said more than a few times that a good piece of legislation is one that doesn't make anyone happy, and this past Farm Bill in the House didn't seem to make enough people happy. It failed. What happened?
Well, Rob, if that's the definition, then I must have an almost perfect piece of legislation. We took a bill to the floor not many days ago that would have cut mandatory spending, not discretionary, but the mandatory spending, the real problem with the national budget, by $40 billion. And we did that in the bill by reforming and reducing spending in all areas of the Farm Bill. We did away with the direct payment program in the commodity title. We reduced the CRP authorization in the conservation title. Those kind of things saved about $20 billion. Over on the nutrition side, we reformed the food stamp program in a way that will not take 1 calorie out of the mouth of one deserving person. They'll just have to prove they qualify. But between LIHEAP and categorical eligibility, we save about $20 billion more dollars. So yes, everybody helped, and apparently that inflamed everybody simultaneously.
I want you to give us a little bit of a civic lesson. You mentioned mandatory versus discretionary spending. Tell us the difference.
Discretionary spending is the kind of spending that Congress has engaged in since 1789, where you appropriate money for 1 year at a time. You don't obligate future Congresses, and think of everything from the Department of Defense on down in that regard. Mandatory spending, Rob, is something that has evolved since the 1930s, where you put programs in place, and if a person qualifies for the program, they receive the benefit whether it's been appropriated or not. They automatically get it. Food stamps falls in that category. There's a certain amount of the commodity title spending in the Farm Bill that falls in that category, but it's automatic spending. And we've done a pretty good job in the last 5 years of turning down discretionary spending. But the thing that's really tearing up the federal budget is the mandatory, the automatic spending. That's why this Farm Bill was so important to me personally. Not only good farm policy, not only good social nutrition policy, but $40 billion in mandatory spending reductions over the next 5 years. No other committees match that, and I hope my friends in the House, maybe in a second try, will understand that.
So you weren't rewarded for that $40 billion in cut. Could it be that maybe it was too deep for some and too much for others?
That's a good way to describe it, Rob. When push came to shove, we did 100+ amendments on the floor of the United States House, a very open process. I would tell you that there were changes made in the commodity title. The supply management part of the dairy program was stripped on the floor. But by and large, the commodity title, the things that raised the food, stayed in place. The real controversy was over on the social nutrition side, food stamps. You remember I mentioned we ended automatic food stamps. Categorical eligibility would stop under the bill. And that's a loophole in federal law where 40-some states say if you qualify for some other federal welfare benefit, we'll automatically give you food stamps without applying.
And that could be a very small benefit, correct?
Yes, that's $12 billion a year. The other thing that we changed dramatically, something called LIHEAP. A lot of folks call it heat and eat. Northern states will send, in some cases, as small as $1 to their citizens to help pay for their home heating cost. Probably between a cup and a pint of home heating oil for the month. But that triggers a full month's worth of automatic food stamps. We say in the bill, no states, if you're going to help your citizens, put $20 in the game. CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, scores that at $8 billion. So $12 billion saved by ending automatic food stamps, $8 billion saved by making states play fair in LIHEAP. But on the floor, and by the way, in the committee mark of the bill, we would end the USDA advertising food stamps, hiring recruiters to advertise food stamps. We would end the USDA's ability to engage foreign governments in advertising food stamps outside the country. Big time reforms, Rob. But on the floor, there were amendments added to strengthen the state's ability to require drug testing for SNAP. That drove some of my liberal colleagues crazy. There was language to prohibit a lifetime prohibition on federal felons of ever using food stamps. And you can debate the moral issues there, but it was adopted. But the one that finally, I think, broke the camel's back, that final straw, that last brick on the pack mule, was the language adopted by the House to require a work requirement. Able-bodied people would have to make an effort to work every month to qualify for their food stamps. The liberals couldn't take that much reform. And ironically, 62 of my Republican colleagues who voted for all the reforms wouldn't vote for the final draft of the bill. So if I'm a little unhappy with my friends, Rob, I'm unhappy with my friends on both sides of the room, because we have to have this reform. We have to have this reform. And if you're going to vote for reforms, I really think you need to follow them all the way to fruition, Rob. But maybe I'm still carrying a few scars from the battle on the floor.
Well, the Farm Bill certainly become a food bill. And, you know, when you talk about the nutrition programs, I know there's been a dramatic growth. What is it, 18 to 46 million? But on the flip side of that, most of the people on these feeding programs, are they not the working poor?
Exactly, Rob. 80% of the Farm Bill now are the social nutrition programs, food stamps, school lunch, and WIC, although we leave WIC and school lunch alone. The other 20%, rural development, conservation, the commodity titles, farm credit, the things, ag research, the things that most people would define as raising the food. But in that final go, trying to achieve the balance between the two, I can say in good faith that the committee passed draft of the bill, while it would save $20 billion in food stamp expenditures, would not deny one qualified needy person from being helped. They just have to demonstrate their income and their asset levels, prove they qualify, and we'll help them. That didn't seem unreasonable, because when the bill left the committee, I had a majority of both Republicans and Democrats vote for it. I went to the floor with a bipartisan bill. And of course, the body worked its will, and the will wasn't quite what I was hoping for, but we're going to try again, Rob. You have to have a comprehensive farm policy. This bill has to be passed. If for no other reason than at the end of the year it begins to expire and the old 1949 law kicks in, and we don't want allotments and quotas, the complications of parity pricing, production history issues. We can't go back to the 49 law.
But this was a bill that was supposed to pass last calendar year, was it not?
Yes. Once again, the committee passed a bipartisan bill out. My majority leadership said they didn't have the votes to pass it on the floor, and therefore floor time was never allocated to me. This year, we passed it by a slightly bigger bipartisan margin in the committee. I worked with my ranking member, Mr. Peterson. Even up until the night before the final vote, we had the votes, Rob. But on the day of the last 5 amendments, when the final reform package was put together on SNAP, my liberal friends said, whoa, that's too much, we can't go this far. Now, what the next bill will look like, there are some in leadership who are talking about splitting the bill in 2 parts, running a food stamp bill and then running an everything else bill. That's an interesting strategy. I think that would wind up having to be a party line vote. I don't see any Democrats who would really have any urge to vote that away. But I would also say, for those who think they can just do it that way, when we go to conference with the Senate, we have to balance our bills out. The Senate's not all that enthused about any reforms in food stamps. We reform $20.5 billion total. They reform $4.5 billion, Rob. What if they just refuse to conference the food stamp side? Do I make the changes in the commodity side and in the things that raise the food supply? Well, that's important, and we have a real farm bill. But I'll have lost my opportunity to make reforms in SNAP, in the food stamps, and that'd be kind of sad. And by the same token, if it's only a farm bill that comes out of conference committee, can I persuade enough inner city and urban members that it's important? Now, you and I both know that a farm bill helps make sure that consumers in this country and around the world have an affordable, safe, plentiful food supply. But part of my problem is so many of the folks I serve with in Congress are so far removed from the production of, the processing of, the distribution of the food supply.
So strategically, it would seem that decoupling those two could be bad long term.
I think it makes it harder. Now, what I've told my majority leadership is, whatever gets 218 votes, I'm in favor of. I've got to get to conference, because when we conference with the Senate, the final bill will come together, and it won't look exactly like either chamber's version. I've got to get the final bill put together, and I think ultimately a conference committee report would be adopted by both bodies, because in spite of the concern about the last few elements of reform in the food stamp program, my friends in the minority and most of my friends in the majority really didn't complain about ending automatic food stamps, didn't complain about the LIHEAP changes, that $20 billion. It was too logical, it was too straightforward. But there are groups that I work with back east, the political bounty hunters, so to speak, who I'm not sure they really want a farm bill. I don't know that they want us to accomplish things.
Is it divide and conquer? Is that what we're talking about?
I would just say that there's more money to be made by the political mercenaries back east in a state of confusion, chaos, a lack of anything happening, than it is for us to work in regular order, get our business done, and go home.
Okay.
That's sad, but it's the world we live in, Rob.
Now, this farm bill was rather historic in that we're going, or at least the plan was, to kind of do away with direct payments, something that's been with us since the 90s, which kind of took on a life of their own. They really weren't put there to be permanent, were they?
Exactly. The view originally in the 1996 Farm Bill was that the annual payments would be a transition payment as we would adjust as the world would become a more open and fair trading place. It ultimately became the safety net and a tool by which producers were able to address weather, address markets, address world competition, imbalances in trade. And from the perspective of international trade, the World Trade Organization, WTO, it's the most compliant part of the Farm Bill. It's the least trade distorting in the eyes of the ag economist. But there's no political support for it. The media and a number of my colleagues who maybe don't focus quite as much time as they should, not as much time as you do, as I do, make it impossible to sustain. So we have to move forward in a different direction. And that's why your safety net now, as envisioned by the House mark, won't be direct payments anymore. That's gone forever. It's using insurance where producers pay premiums, whether it's to address weather or the shallow loss crop revenue program that the Midwesterners want, or the price protection perspective we have in the rest of the country, but using insurance where producers pay a premium, where they only benefit if there's a dramatic weather or price change. In most years, nothing will be paid out, going to that kind of a system. But most folks are still focused on the old direct payment system, and it's not in any draft of the bill. As soon as we pass a new farm bill, that system is gone.
Is crop insurance more important to those of us that make our living off the land here in the middle of America and really places where the southern plains where it's been very volatile? Are they more important to us than other parts of the country?
Historically, Rob, yes, crop insurance was more important to us where we have tough weather challenges. I mean, how can it be more challenging than living in the southern part of the plains on the east side of the Rockies? But if you talk to a farmer in Indiana or Illinois or virtually any other part of the country, they'll now look you in the eye and say, my banker used to only ask for my tax return. Now my banker has to have my insurance policy, my crop insurance policy, to go with my tax return. And it's not because he or she demand it, it's because the bank examiners demand they have that in their file from me. So it's become an important financing tool. And if you just do away with crop insurance, as some of my colleagues would like to do back east, and you don't have the certainty of the direct payment anymore, we're going to make it very difficult, especially for smaller operators, younger operators, beginning operators, to secure the financing they need.
Who would oppose it? Is it just because that is partially taxpayer funded?
I serve in an idealistic time where I have outside groups that attack everything the federal government does. And they would tell you that the federal government shouldn't be a part of this. But the federal government's engaged in federal flood insurance. The federal government is providing a safety net for consumers called the food stamp program, just to pick and choose because farmers represent a smaller political group, a smaller set of voices, to pick and choose us to pick on. I find that particularly offensive.
A final question. You know, you're visiting us here on the July 4th recess. And by my calendar, you have a few weeks, and then there's the August recess, then you come back, and then September 30th, you guys are done.
We're right there. That's why I'm near frantic to get my work done in the next couple of weeks after we go back to the nation's capital, so I'll have time to do the pre-conference, to work through the things that Senator Stabenow, Cochran, and I, and Ranking Member Peterson on the House side can sort out. There are a few things, like ultimately what the savings numbers are in nutrition, that may require some input from the White House, the Speaker, and the Majority Floor Leader, simply because our numbers are too far apart. But we still have to have time on the floor. We still have to make the case. We can still get there. And bear in mind, too, when people are frustrated with the body, understand that I operate in a time where I've got a very conservative United States House. Well, that's a 3rd District of Oklahoma definition. Very liberal president, and a Senate where nobody in particular is in control. So if that's not challenging enough, remember, half of the House of Representatives was not members in part of the membership when we voted on the 2008 bill. Half the 435 weren't there. So I have a lot of members who have not been through a Farm Bill debate before, have never focused on the issues before, have never really come to understand why it matters in parts of their district before. So I've got a great education process. So I've got a very divided political landscape. I've got a very green body as a whole on members. And all those things together mean I just have to work harder.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rob.
Now, if you'd like to learn more about the controversies surrounding farm subsidies, as well as a profile of Ag Committee Chair Frank Lucas, just head to our website at okhorizon.com and look under our value added section.